Hey, HCDA, and today I want to share with you my review of Final Factory. This is an indie game in the automation genre made by a small developer team in which you're going to be building space stations in order to, well, build your factory. Rather than just building a factory, you're actually going to be able to turn those space stations into spaceships as well, but more about that later. The game is come out on April 9th, so you could pick this game up as soon as you watch this review, but of course, make sure you watch the review first. Now, when I say it's coming out on April 9th, I do have to point out that it's releasing into early access, as I understand. So that means it will not actually be the formal release, but you will be able to access the game and play it as it develops. Now, honestly, when it comes to automation games, as many of you know, this is not actually necessarily a bad thing. Some of the most popular automation games, like for example Satisfactory and Isosphere Program, are also in early access, and all that means is that the game will continue to develop as you play it, so you could actually return back to it maybe in a couple of months and find out that you have an entire new game to play. I've been playing the beta version, so that is worth noting as well, so there could be some upgrades or things in the actual early access release that were not available in my beta version just yet. Now overall, I would say the current version of the game has something between 30 and maybe 50 hours of gameplay included in it, depending a bit of how you play it, how much you like designing space stations and things like that. But I couldn't really find any gameplay bugs or crashes or anything like that, so you're not going to be crashing to blue screens or anything like that. At least that was not my experience. I did find a couple of bugs when it came to the blueprints, where blueprints were just not showing up even after I made them, and then like 5 minutes later they would show up. A little bit strange on how that worked. I couldn't really replicate it or anything like that, but overall it wasn't really anything that bothered me too much. Now let's talk about the gameplay. You start out as a small ship and you're going to be mining asteroids. Nothing special about that so far. However, of course, you don't want to start doing this by hand for too long, so you're going to be building some mining outposts. Those mining outposts will actually need to have mining drones assigned to them, so you're going to be building a couple of those. And of course, soon after, you're going to automate the production of those mining drones to make sure those mining stations never run out of drones, because the drones do actually wear out after a time, so you're going to need to replace them. You're also going to be building combat fighters, because there will be enemies lurking in the fog ahead, so you will definitely need to make sure you are well defended. Although you do actually have the option to turn the enemy off if that's not something you like in your automation games, so it's really nice that it already launches with that particular feature included. Now, once you actually have your first small factory, you're going to want to scale up, and the nice thing is, in this game blueprints are unlocked from the start, so if you make a nice sweet looking design, you will never have to think about that again. There's no blueprint size limit or anything like that, so you can just copy and paste whatever you have. Now, where things really get interesting is that you are not just going to be building space stations, but you are actually going to be able to have those space stations move around as well. You can give them orders, you can program them to deliver resources from A to B, things like that. So other than the fact that you actually have some smaller ships that more or less do that as well, you can actually start automating your entire factory and have that move around. So that's actually really cool, because asteroids will run out of materials, and once that happens, you can actually just reposition your entire factory to accommodate the new resources that you found in the meanwhile. You can also use the same system to design exploration vessels, combat vessels, or logistics vessels. So actually that gives you a lot of options that go beyond just building a plain straight up factory. Now, you will not be able to just build one giant space station, because you will need to balance power, heat and stability. Power speaks kind of for itself. You need to make sure there's enough power coming into your station, and heat is also pretty straightforward for the moment, because basically some buildings will be producing heat and you will need a way to get rid of that. However, stability is the more interesting factor, because stability is actually generated by connecting multiple buildings together, and the more buildings you connect together, the less stable your station gets. However, in placing your buildings in a smart way, using things like struts, extra space stations that are specifically designed to give your station more stability, you will actually be able to scale up your station a lot further than if you do not pay attention to these things. It's not the most complex system in the world, but it is actually a very nice little puzzle to see how many buildings you can fit into your space station without having to resort to a new one, because as I said, you can actually move them around, so you kind of want to have your space stations to be one large thing. Now, the end goal of the game is going to be to clone yourself and send yourself into the next galaxy, and in order to do that, you're going to have to work your way through a pretty long technology tree. There is a lot of upgrades in there as well. For example, there's more advanced technologies giving you access to produce power in different ways, produce resources in different ways, and all of that actually feeds back into the design of your space stations, because well, after you designed your first couple of space stations and you unlock some more technologies, you're probably going to want to turn back to those earlier designs and kind of upgrade them, tweak them, and take advantage of those new designs. So all in all, that keeps things fresh for a very long time. When it comes to the difficulty of this game, there's two factors to consider. First of all, we have the actual factory part. So building a factory in this game, because you are building space stations, is actually really fun. All the different components that go into a space station have a clear purpose, they're pretty well described and things like that. And because your stations need to be of a relatively small size, although there's no limit on how many space stations you can build, so you can of course make the total construct as large as you want. It's still pretty straightforward to actually do so without being too simple. So I think it's on a nice level of challenge when it comes to the intellectual challenge of actually designing your factory and making things work. The interesting thing is, even though there is not a huge amount of different resources, all those resources need to be combined in continually different ways. So you actually are usually kind of working around, okay, what do I need and where do I get it from and how do I get it from A to B? Because there's not dozens of different places where you get those resources from. There's only a couple of asteroids initially. So you will need to work around the space that you have and the direction things are coming from. When it comes to actually dealing with the enemy, you might actually be challenged quite a bit as well. Now, again, I would just want to emphasize that if you do not want enemies in your game, you can actually turn them off. So that is a nice feature to have. But if you do keep them on, even on the default difficulty, I was having some issues actually defending myself. And not issues in the sense that it wasn't doable, but they were definitely keeping me on my toe. I wasn't just splattering them all over the place or anything like that. And the largest factor that contributes to that is that when you're initially designing your space stations, it actually takes some time. And while you're doing that, the enemy does ramp up a little bit in strength, and as you venture out into the corners of your universe, the enemy becomes stronger as well. And the enemy comes from pretty much any random direction, so you can easily be caught off guard by a wave of enemies coming in from a direction you didn't expect. Now on top of that, because most of your defenses, like the turrets that you can build that require fuel, or the fighters that you can build that might get destroyed and need to be replaced, all of that does actually cost resources, so you do need to keep an eye on the production of all of these things, because if you don't keep it up, the enemy will slowly kind of whittle away on your defenses, and at some point they might get destroyed. Now, with dozens of factory games out there, let's talk about the pros and cons of this particular one. First of all, let's start out with a couple of the negative things. I do think the controls in this game could use a little bit of work, although everything that you need to do in this game, like copy and pasting buildings, copy and pasting recipes and things like that, is possible. It would be really nice if you could, for example, shift click a building and copy paste it like that and just place a copy of it right next to it, without having to resort to Ctrl-C, selecting Ctrl-V and things like that. Just quality of life stuff really, but it does work out to be sort of annoying if you have to do things over and over again, although you do get used to it if you play for a couple of hours. So again, it's not the biggest thing in the world. Some other things that I would like to see in this game that weren't actually included, at least not in the beta version that I played, were things like the recipe showing on the building, or at least having a toggle you could turn that on. You actually have to click on the building to see what it's producing, or you would have to visually identify what is going in and out of the building in order to do so, which is a little bit of a problem when it's not producing, so then you have to figure out what is missing. Now, is that the biggest problem in the world? Again, no, but it would be nice to have it. Now, on the plus side, I do think that the fact that all the different buildings are very easily identifiable, that they have their distinct looks, you're never really starting to kind of glaze over your factory to figure out where things are, because everything is really easy to find. All the different things that you're going to be producing are fairly easy to identify, even if they are like in the belt structure, the connector structure that you have. Everything moving through your factory is pretty easy to identify what is going where and what items they are. I also want to emphasize that actually designing a space station is super fun. Again, because everything has its own distinct look, but also just because, I don't know, the whole concept is just really fun. It's a nice little fun puzzle to work around. Now, I also would like to put the enemies in the plus category. I know a lot of these games have different types of enemies, so it's not like it's the world's shocking feature or anything like that, but the way they're tuned, they do actually keep you on your toes. If you don't want them, again, you can turn them off, so I think that's a plus. But if you do want them, like I do, then actually having them in the game does put another edge on the game that you would not have if you're just playing in a sandbox. So in summary, while this is definitely an indie game and the beta was a little bit rough around the edges here and there, it is very addicting, and I expect this game will keep you busy for quite a few evenings. Just to give you an example of my own experience, in the past few weeks of playing, I've had this recurring thing where I close down the game and then it just keeps buzzing in the back of my head, and I will be thinking about different designs, different ways of making things actually work. And in my opinion, that is a very good sign for a automation game like this. If that is what it does to you, it's doing something right. Like I've said before, designing the space stations is very fun as well, and I do like to actually make these nice little symmetric designs and things like that. So if that is your thing, then I think you're going to have a lot of fun with this game as well. So let me know in the comments what you think about this game, and also it's worth noting that I will be making some guides on this game because, again, I'm having a lot of fun with this, so I hope you will too. So if you're up for playing this game, then make sure you like and subscribe, but also make sure you watch out for those upcoming guides in order to get some inspiration for your own designs if you want them. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.